Right, so Glastonbury has been well and truly overshadowed by their decision to ban a certain film. You might have heard a thing or two about this, deservedly so, in my opinion. Not only is new information has surfaced concerning the reasoning that may have been behind that decision, but also because of what it says about the festival itself in this day and age. Now, when I covered this story earlier in the week, there was much emphasis on the festival itself being leant on. The Board of Deputies of British Jews, their President Marie van der Zyl, extolling how pleased she was that the Eavis family who run the show decided to drop it. And this, of course, caused uproar, because it was only back in 2017 that Michael Eavis invited Jeremy Corbyn to speak on the main stage, addressed the crowd of thousands, and they all broke into a chorus of Oh Jeremy Corbyn, sung to the tune of Seven Nation Army by the White Stripes, as I'm sure many of you will be familiar with. A politician, little bearded fella, then in his late 60s, getting people predominantly of a demographic utterly turned off by politics to engage in it by speaking directly to them, speaking for them, and selling them a vision of change. They embraced it. Never before have I certainly seen a politician address such a crowd and get that kind of reaction. And now that vision for change has been so successfully killed off by the Labour right, by Keir Starmer and his later act of backstabbing sabotage over a second referendum with Remain on the table where it came to Brexit, knowing the damage he was doing, knowing he was destroying a unique moment in time where this country could have fundamentally shifted in terms of equality, in terms of those with and those without. The reason we have no choice again now, the reason there's no differentiation between blue Tories or red Tories again, and the reason we reached this point is in no small part thanks to the man who now leads those red Tories. So if you watch my stuff and still can't fathom why I will not back Labour, led as it is by now to get the Tories out, it's because Starmer chose them and not us. He chose the few, not the many. He chose himself over all else because really he is a Tory himself. Keir Starmer has reduced our politics again to the disillusionment too many of us have never known anything different from, and he will not change a damn thing. It's exactly what he wants. He's in this for himself utterly, and his ambitions know no bounds. But of course, the film, this is what I'm supposed to be talking about here. It got banned here and now. A cynic might have pointed to the Eavis family embracing some of that Corbyn surge back in 2017, the popularity at the time, and now that Corbyn is lambasted, utterly false by elements of our rancid right-wing billionaire-owned media regarding that issue of antisemitism, and it has once more provided cover for another ban, for more censorship where it comes to Corbyn. The film, many are claiming, is anti-Semitic, and it's not just the Board of Deputies doing that either, but any other unsavoury element who would choose to weaponise that issue, likely not having even seen it, such as the pathetic review by fake lefty Paul Mason, still sniffing around for a parliamentary opportunity in Keir Starmer's likely future government. That dominant narrative, however, is undone by one very underreported bit of news, and that is that a lawyer hired by Glastonbury to sign off on performances to ensure there were no issues with anything having gone on record to say there is nothing anti-Semitic about this film. The quote being widely shared by that lawyer being the festival organisers even had a lawyer examine the film who pronounced it totally devoid of anti-Semitism. So why, in that case, did it get cancelled? Much more emphasis, it seems, went into targeting not Glastonbury itself, but its sponsors. Vodafone, for example, as I spoke about the other day, were targeted by the campaign against anti-Semitism and threats of pulling sponsorship and defunding of the festival, going to their donors effectively. Showing this ban means that the festival has been bought. Vodafone and whoever else were contacted and lent on owned the festival, since without their funding, clearly, it could not go ahead. Their financing giving them the clout, it would seem, to demand a film that had been advertised for a month leading up to Glastonbury, got pulled at the last minute, because, of course, all these accusations only came in at the last minute. That's deliberate. That's targeted. That is in order to make the maximum amount of damage possible. That's in order to silence and counter the established narrative as it has been ingrained in our society, and spell out the truth about the smears made against Corbyn, because God forbid there be two sides to this that everybody gets to hear. God forbid the allegations made in the media and by bad faith actors be challenged, because if they were, they would fall apart instantly. The accusation is made. It must therefore stand for establishment interests. But should it? Clearly, you only have to raise the allegation of anti-Semitism these days, and sponsors, as well as festivals, along with anyone afraid of being called a racist, despite knowing they are not, will capitulate. A lifelong anti-racist ends up labelled as one, and for many people now, he will never be seen as anything else. For God's sake, I mean, the film is narrated by a Jewish comedian, and the film itself is stuffed with Jewish people calling out the lies about a guy they know is on their side. Cancelling the film cancels them, so how is that better? How can that not be considered anti-Semitic? Jewish people getting cancelled on the basis that other Jewish people might be offended by anti-Semitic content, despite there not being any anti-Semitic content as stated, as confirmed by a lawyer. That's where we're at, folks. And Glastonbury, like so many others, rolled over, because for them it boiled down to the necessary finances. It came down to money. The sponsors were unhappy at the end of the day. Glastonbury itself began in the 70s, and it was free. It was an event full of music, yes, but also of socialism, of the arts. In the 80s, in conjunction with the campaign for nuclear disarmament, no less, the original pyramid stage was built, using old telegraph poles and old metal sheeting procured from the Ministry of Defence. A new children's charity was started. This was the central ethos of what Glastonbury was. And 1981 is notable because that's the first year the festival ever made any profits. And out of those profits, Michael Eavis gave £200,000 to CND. That was what Glastonbury was all about. But as it has grown, as it has got bigger, that ethos seems sadly to have vanished, to the point that a lifelong anti-racist, welcome just a few years ago, is the subject of censorship there now, not because of a racist content in a film, but because it exposes the weaponization of racism by others who see fit to do just that, by its sponsors, because the festival has become utterly commercialized, apparently sacrificing what they stood for along the way, sadly. The people who have done this are not interested in truth or justice or holding racism to account. It is not a defense of Jewish people when the film features so many of them to cancel it. It is a bid to silence critics where certain people do not want criticism being laid, and that always seems to boil down to connections with the Israeli treatment of Palestinians ultimately, with the Israeli government that is committing such atrocities. The same people responsible for this film getting banned, the likes of the campaign against anti-Semitism, the likes of the Board of Deputies of British Jews, the same people who are getting this banned are the same people who are also defending an apartheid state in Israel. It is not the falsely accused anti-Semitism deniers we as a society should be angry at. It is the apartheid deniers instead. And with anti-boycott, divestment and sanctions legislation being tabled shortly by the Tories, no doubt to be supported enthusiastically by Keir Starmer, Zionist without qualification as he is, speaking out against Israeli atrocity is going to become more and more difficult to do. Apartheid deniers in power, that should horrify us. As for the film, the actions of Glastonbury and those who brought about the banning of The Big Lie, it seems to have backfired on them somewhat, as more people than ever before are wanting to see it. A screening has happened at Glastonbury now, held by Real Films in a separate area. Well done to them for that. More screenings are planned by them, I understand, and a lot more are planned around the country by Platform Films, the makers. So kudos to all of them. And keep an eye on the Platform Films website for showings near you. And after you've liked, shared and subscribed to the channel, as I sincerely hope you will, hundreds more videos to tickle your political pickle, try this video recommendation next, where it's not only Israeli apartheid Keir Starmer is tenured to, but when it comes to donors, to what passes for his Labour Party these days, throwbacks to South African apartheid is welcome too. And I'll catch you on the next video. Cheers, folks.